Welcome to another Silicon Labs podcast. This episode shares a Q&A session discussing Tiny Gecko Series 1, the latest low-energy microcontroller from Silicon Labs. Alex Kopsel handles IoT product marketing for 32-bit MCUs at Silicon Labs and is joining us to provide answers to our questions.
Yep. Hi, Kyle. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
So, Alex, I was hoping you could answer a few questions. We've talked a lot about the Tiny Gecko. I looked through a lot of the material that you've provided on the web and things that you've shared with me. I think these are questions that might help some customers and some of our own employees. The first question, just to help everybody, is what are the top three things that you think engineers will love about the new Tiny Gecko?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question and easy for people to remember. I'll go over a few things. Before I go into each of those, I want to clarify too that Tiny Gecko Series 1, I may also refer to it throughout here today as Tiny Gecko 11 or TG11 just for short. So those are all the same products. But to answer the question, the first major thing that I think everyone's going to love is the fact that it's super low energy and has unique low power capability. I mean, that's really built into the architecture of all our EFM32 products. So when we're talking to developers, embedded developers working on battery powered applications, they love this product because it can do things in deep sleep mode and very low current levels that other products can't do. To give some examples of that, the LE Sense interface is an autonomous sensor interface on Tiny Gecko. It has up to 16 channels that can, sample things externally 1,000 times per second at a very low 1.4 microamp current level. That's really unique for us. All the analog peripherals are now usable down to low energy state stop mode. So we're talking about ADCs, DACs, op amps, the capacitive touch with wake up feature. Those are all very unique. And then on top of that, we obviously know MCUs don't sit in deep sleep mode all day. So eventually they're going to need to wake up at time, probably multiple times to process things. So TG11 has a very fast wake up time from all its energy modes, even compared against competitors. So that's another thing developers are really going to love. And then finally, I wanted to mention as security is becoming more of a concern. We see hacks all the time, right, going on today. TG11 has a lot of dedicated hardware for security, like AES crypto, a true random number generator, and lots of things that can help people build in security into their applications. So that's the first thing is low power capabilities. The second is I want to highlight a couple of unique features, again, making it super clear of what things are unique for us versus, a lot of the other MCU options out there from ST or Atmel or whoever they may be. So when you look at the class that Tiny Gecko 11 falls into, which is low power Cortex-M0 plus, kind of medium level MCUs. One of the unique features is again the LE Sense, which we talked about, but a new one that we've got now is a low power segment LCD driver. So Tiny Gecko 11 has an integrated LCD controller, segment LCD controller, and we have a patent pending on a unique charge distribution method that can save power in up to 40%. I'll talk a little bit later about what applications that can be useful in. The capacitive touch controller is really unique. So I mentioned, it can wake on touch. It can sense up to 38 touch points. And then as soon as someone comes up and hits any of the buttons, it'll wake up from deep sleep and, do something else. And then finally, we've added a new serial interface network CAN controller to this device. So now that's going to open up some new opportunities, hopefully for developers building industrial applications that want to use CAN. And so then the last piece to really round this all out is a little bit higher level, but it's the flexibility of system design that developers get by using the TG11. So embedded architects who are doing the system design and embedded project managers really are going to love this device because when you look at Silicon Labs portfolio, we've got a full toolbox of MCUs, wireless MCUs, transceivers, sensors. So TG11 is yet another EFM32 that's software compatible with all our wireless Gecko products. So I can't tell you enough how many times I see companies using both our wireless Geckos and our Gecko MCUs, either in the same product or across various projects. So that speaks a lot to how much developers like using them and trust the product and want to have maybe some modularity. In one example, they might use an MCU with a network coprocessor. Another example, they might just use one of our SFCs or modules. Aside from that, in terms of flexibility as well, we've added more memory to this device, and you can use actually Micrium on this. So hopefully everyone listening is familiar with the Micrium OS, now part of Silicon Labs company. So that's something we've opened up to developers. The kernel's free, and then that also comes with a lot of middleware stacks. Like, for example, if they're using CAN, we offer a Micrium CAN stack that you could use as well. So that's pretty much it. I know it was a super long-winded answer. Sorry about that, but hopefully that helps.
That's all right. No, that's what we're on this for. So, can you expand a little bit? You mentioned you could talk to us a little bit about the low energy LCD driver.
Yeah, so I briefly alluded to that. I'll go into a little bit more detail and give a couple examples of where it'll be useful. Yeah, so what we do is on this technology, we have this special, when a display is going through its duty cycle refresh phase, it kind of behind the scenes, our human eye doesn't see it. We short all the segment lines together, and this effectively, physically reduces the power by reducing the voltage swing. So it depends, and how much energy or power you're going to save depends on a couple things. It depends on the number of segments you're using, the display duty cycle, the backlight intensity, and then really most importantly, how often is that display actually on? But you can kind of do some, back of the napkin analysis of how much power you're going to save, and we've estimated through an application note that we can save up to 40%. So what applications is that good for? Well, one example is the blood glucose meters. Yeah, Tiny Gecko is used in blood glucose meters, and you can imagine a user or a healthcare provider having to pick this thing up and use it a couple times a day. Now they can prolong their battery life, and they don't have to replace the batteries in that every 6 months or charge it every day. They can, use this over and over again because we can prolong the battery life in those devices. Another example would be building control or building automation, like thermostats or some detectors. You can imagine like a gas leak detector in a factory or something. That display might be on all day. So that's a great example. But it might be portable because you want to, place it in a certain area of the factory. And then lastly, another example I wanted to give was a water or gas meter. Tiny Gecko and a lot of our EFM32 are very popular in smart metering applications. So that will really just depend on, many of those applications have displays. Do they need the low energy feature? Maybe yes, maybe not. It depends if they, turn the display off after such amount of time of not being used. But those are really some of the key applications that could use this.
All right, well, that's great on the low energy LCD driver, but I'm excited to hear more about the CAN. I've worked with other microcontrollers that have CAN support. This is great that we now have a Tiny Gecko to offer customers. Can you explain? You mentioned the Micrium CAN software. What can customers expect when they engage with us on a CAN opportunity?
Sure, yeah. So just a little bit of background. Maybe some developers aren't super familiar with CAN. I'll give a quick couple sentences. CAN is a networking interface, an ISO standard designed for multi-node networks, kind of similar to RS-485, especially networks that are in robust environments, harsh environments. So it started with Bosch, primarily designed for automotive, but it's really migrated over to things like factory automation, factory sensors, industrial equipment like elevators, for example, and occasionally industrial medical equipment. So we see Tiny Gecko being used in a lot of those industrial equipment and factory automation use cases. And so Tiny Gecko Series 1 is now, and our Giant Gecko 11, that Series 1 that's launching this year in March as well, has CAN integrated, and they basically get everything as the the software we mentioned from Micrium, then the physical interface, and the only thing needed is the external transceiver, and we actually have an expansion kit for that. So someone interested in getting started with CAN, to answer your question, could buy the Tiny Gecko or Giant Gecko kit, and then our CAN expansion kit with the transceiver on it, get plugged up. I think we've got an example, a demo already ready in our Simplicity Studio tool, and that's pretty much it.
All right, no, that's good. I'll have to try out that demo. I'll look at the app note and see how it works. That's cool. So again, in our conversations, and you mentioned it in your first part, the breadth of our offering and how it goes between, MCU and wireless. Can you talk to us about where you see Tiny Gecko specifically in wireless applications? Whereas, they don't use our wireless SoCs, but you mentioned sometimes they use Tiny Gecko within a wireless application. What types of applications have you seen that be very popular?
Right. Yeah, the most common Tiny Gecko could be used or is used next to a Bluetooth module, for example. That's, I mentioned the blood glucose meter. That's a prime example. A lot of blood glucose meters or handheld meters like that are adding either Bluetooth connectivity to a phone or Wi-Fi. So that's an example where as customers are now or developers are now adding wireless, they're using our Tiny Gecko and just adding a module. And obviously the benefit of the module is that it's pre-certified, has integrated antenna, really simplifies the design and helps the application development go a lot faster and smoother. Um, let's see. Another example would be a door lock, right? A door lock used to just be a mechanical device with a key, and now we're seeing smart door locks in hotels and in all kinds of buildings. So that's another example where we're seeing Bluetooth connectivity being added, even to the point where sometimes if might have an app or awareness through your phone that you walk up to the door and it might automatically unlock for you, something like that. So that's another example where Tiny Gecko could be used. And then I mentioned metering, and I said that that's a very popular application, water metering, gas metering, heat cost allocators, things like that. So that is, again, back to the point of having flexibility and modularity. People can use the Tiny Gecko next to a transceiver if they want the radio flexibility, or they could be using the Tiny Gecko as the metrology side, and then one of our wireless geckos, like the Flex Gecko, which does sub-gigahertz long-range wireless, next to it for the wireless piece. And a lot of customers, actually, a lot of developers like keeping those separate. They don't want to go to a single SoC, or they can't because they don't have the features, right? A lot of wireless SoCs don't have segment display. So if you need a segment display driver, then the Tiny Gecko would be great because it can do that. It can do, host MICRAM if you need MICRAM. It has enough memory for that, and it has a lot of other features that, again, the wireless side don't. So it's a two-way street. Sometimes we see the MCUs applications adding our wireless, or sometimes we see our wireless developers adding the MCU for the extra features.
All right, that makes sense.
Yep.
All right. Well, hey, I really appreciate you spending the time, Alex. We'll have to do this again. I know you're working on some other new products that are being introduced, and it's always good to answer some questions for the customers. So thanks for your time. And I know, is there a website maybe that the listeners could go to get maybe on their website some more information?
Yeah, sure. I should know it by hand, but I don't. But the easiest way to get there, honestly, is our Silicon Labs website, www.silabs.com or siliconlabs.com. They'll both take you there. And then go to the MCU section and 32-bit EFM32. And there's a nice table that has all our EFM32 products there. And Tiny Gecko 11 or Series 1 will probably be highlighted as one of the new ones because it's our latest device. So,
All right. Well, thank you very much, Alex.
yep, no problem.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks.